But let's get to the point of what I want to talk about in my vlog, which is entry-level, small, or just small displacement sport bikes. There's been a big controversy lately because Jake made a video about leader bikes being useless, and of course all the leader bike guys got their panties in a wad about that, which, you know, some of them had some really good points. I don't really know how I feel about leader bikes being useless or not. I think they definitely have their place. You know, I think a lot of guys that get a leader bike only do it just so they can say they have a leader bike. That's a whole other thing. But I know there are some legit reasons, like Motornosity brought up how much nicer and more composed it is at highway speeds and stuff like that. So, you know, my main thing, a lot of people started talking about like Ninja 250s, Ninja 300s, CBR250s. I brought up the new R3. So I wanted to talk about these small displacement sport bikes. Say you're starting out and you really have to have a sport bike. You just got to have one. You don't want to hear it about a supermoto. You don't want to learn how awesome they are. You want a sport bike. Okay, well that's fine. That's cool. So you got a couple choices. Well, I mean, you have more than a couple, but you have a couple mainstream choices, which would be CBR250. I think they make a CBR300 now. They might have dropped 250. Anyway, you have the CBR net size. You have the Ninja 300. And you have the R3 that just came out. I don't really see the Hondas as a valid choice, and here's the reason. Honda makes bikes that are very polished feeling. They have a lot of bells and whistles. They're kind of pretty. But if you look at the power output, the non-RR Hondas are pretty pathetic power-wise. I was just reading an article about like the adventure bike class, and the Honda was like 25 plus horsepower down on every other bike in the 600 class adventure bikes and in the leader bike adventure bikes, you know, like the V-Strom 1000 versus 1000 and all those. Honda was just way low. The CRF250L. Now, granted, a 250 dual sport's never going to be a rocket ship, but a CRF250L makes like 18 horsepower, which is that's just sad. That's just so sad. I mean, I guess for the money, because it's like $4,900, it's all right, but it's pretty pathetic. So the CBR, you know, of course you look up the CBRs, and the CBRs don't make shit for power. Now, granted, as a new rider, you have no business having a bike with a lot of power. But, you know, there comes a power level where it's so low that you're going to outgrow it in a month. And I think a CBR 250 or 300, I think you'll outgrow it in a month. Now, before anybody gets all bent out of shape here and says, oh, it'll take you years of riding experience before you can get the most out of a 250 or 300, and a fast guy at the track on a 300 will smoke a guy on a leader bike. Yes, I know that. I understand that, and I agree. It's absolutely true. But, you know, there's that right there. You're going to want to do that. At some points, you're going to want to just whack the throttle open in a straight line. And the 250 and 300 CBRs they just got nothing. You know, you're going to get bored with that, how hard they don't pull. You're going to get bored with that really quickly. The Ninja 300, it's a little better, but it's still, the power level's still pretty low. Now, the R3, on the other hand, yeah, Yamaha's rating it at 42. I've read 45 in a couple places. And that might not sound like a lot of power. And it really, I mean, it isn't a lot of power, but for a bike that small and light, 42 horsepower, it's going to be pretty peppy. Sure, it's not going to be a rocket ship, but it's a manageable power level without being boring. I think, whereas with a CBR 250 300, you'll get bored with power in, you know, say 2 or 3 months. A Ninja 300, you're going to get bored with power in maybe 6 months. I think the R3 could take you a year and a half before you really feel like, man, I need more power. And I think that's a good thing, because it's, you know, less bikes that you got to buy. I mean, your first bike is not going to be your last bike. If you're a real rider, you're going to go through bikes throughout your life. Now, again, I understand that it will take you years and years of riding before you can get the most out of a 250 or 300 sport bike. I get that, I understand that, and I agree with it. But again, there is the reality that you're going to want to whack the throttle wide open and feel that pull. And there just isn't going to be enough of it in the other bikes. So if you're looking at entry-level, small displacement sport bikes, I would highly recommend that you strongly consider getting the R3 over the Ninja or CBR250s. Potentially a better option, I haven't researched it that much, but I know how the rest of their bikes are, would be the KTM 390s that I'm 99.9% sure are available in the US now. KTM in general makes a little bit nicer bike than most, and now I want a steak. Oh, look at the baby cow. Well, maybe not a baby cow, young cow. Anyway, so I didn't do my research to speak about the KTM 390s, but even just going on displacement alone and knowing what I know about how KTM 450s perform compared to other 450s, you know, from the dealership, I would expect that the KTM 390, I think it's the RC 390. They make a full fairing one. They make a Street Fighter. Anyway, I would bet that it makes, yet again, another 5 or 6 horsepower. And don't sell 5 or 6 horsepower short. Like, apparently the Ninja 300 makes 39 horsepower and the R3 makes 42. That doesn't sound like a lot of a difference, but the difference between 39 horsepower and 42 horsepower, that 3 horsepower on a bike that small and light is definitely a power difference you are going to feel. Also, I believe that the Ninja 300 is a 297cc bike, whereas the R3 I think is a 331cc bike. Even if it's like a 329, it's still basically a 30cc difference. That's a 10% displacement increase. That's going to yield torque increases. It's just going to have a wider, wider torque curve. The entire torque curve is going to be a little taller. So it's more than just, oh, it's got like 3 more foot-pounds of torque. It's got 3 more foot-pounds of torque over the whole curve. And I don't know it's 3. I'm sure it's more than 3, but. So yeah, that's my recommendation. I mean, honestly, my recommendation would be to stay away from all of them and buy an SV650. If you need a full fairing bike, take a look at the Ninja 650 V-twin, not the ZX. I would recommend those over the tiny displacement, 300s and stuff, all day long. But if you really have your mind set on a small displacement sport bike, I would go look, find out what the price is, go look at the KTM. But for simplicity in finding parts in a dealer, you're probably best off with the R3. It's going to outperform the other bikes. It's going to hold you a little bit longer before you get bored with the power. I think it's probably just the better choice. And personally, I know this is subjective, but I think it's a better looking bike. And I'm not really a sport bike guy. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. Let me know what you think. Comment, down in the comments. Be like, oh, this is what I think of this bike, and that's what I think of that bike. But yeah, like it, dislike it if you didn't dislike it. Leave some comments. And if you're not subscribed to me, please consider subscribing. There is going to be a link here at the end. Yeah, that's about it for now. Alright, I will talk to everybody later. Life bag to carry my books and shit. Oh, that'd be comfy seat. Rock!